Coming up with This Week in Computer Hardware, Nvidia 1650. You might want an AMD Instead. 50 new CPUs from Intel, including the first 9th-gen mobile CPUs. Verizon's getting the first 5G phones. Fractal Designs S2 Vision RGB, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 514, recorded on April 25th, 2019. Nvidia 1650, meh. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you all the hardware news. We are not going to talk about the Switch this week or the financial reports. It is all about Intel, Nvidia, 49,000 new CPUs, what may be a disappointing entry-level GPU from Nvidia, and the fate of 5G. Folding phones, and other mayhem. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Sebastian Peak, who is emerging from a deep underground GPU benchmarking festival.
Well, it was only a day and a half, but that's all the time I really had. What I'm emerging from is a week of basically being useless because I was sick, but I guess it happens. I got what everybody else had gotten a couple of months ago, and so when I went to the doctor, he was like, we pretty much haven't seen any of this for a while, but and then of course he gave me almost nothing. He did inform me that I was sick though, which was very reassuring.
It's nice to have that external validation.
Mm-hmm. He's like, well, you're sick. There's no doubt about that. I'm like, well, that's extremely helpful. Thanks you for that.
I thought this was just the way I'd feel as of the age of X. I don't know. I came back from CES once with strep throat. And the doctor, the ER doc, I woke up the day after I got back and I was squeaking when I breathed because my one tonsil had gotten swollen to the size of a baseball. I exaggerate. It was only the size of a golf ball. But the doctor was like, yeah, you run into ER doctors and they're just like, I'm so cool. I'm so chill. And he's like, it's probably just a viral infection. We can't do anything. And it's like click and leans forward. He's like, oh, that's a bacterial infection. And literally starts walking backwards from me. I was like, oh, doctor, does that mean you can help me? And he's like, like putting a script down on the table and pointing at it. It's like, thanks, doc.
They really don't like to give antibiotics these days, I've noticed, unless they absolutely have to.
That's because antibiotics, well, that's a discussion for another show. Antibiotics have been when you start running into antibiotic resistant stuff because people spent too many years giving people antibiotics because, you had to do something to justify what you were charging people. And that'll lead me straight into a big, deep digression on OxyContin, which nobody needs to hear right now. We do need to hear, though, about... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, look, Patrick, just give me antibiotics and steroids. It's all I want. And then I'll go home.
Antibiotics and some painkillers and a pony. Oh, my goodness. Intel, April 23rd, Tuesday this week, Intel announced, give or take, 49,000 new processors. It was an unusual announcement, even by Intel's standards, because I want to say there was upwards of 20 new 9th-gen mobile processors, right? This is the we had the desktop processors this fall. The mobile processors came out. A lot of the news, a lot of the excitement was all around this crazy new i9 9980 HK, which is running 8 cores, 16 threads at up to 5 gigahertz. I think personally is going to be a cooling nightmare, no matter how giant your laptop is. And some of the stuff they were describing on this, right? So these are essentially, coffee-like updates, but one, the core density on that processor must be kind of insane. As we come to expect, up to 18% higher frames per second, compared to a laptop that you should have gotten rid of 4 years ago, kind of stuff. The thing I think was most exciting for me about this was one, looking at like Core i7s are now, 6 core, 12 threads, and these are all 45 watt H series parts, right? So they're all premium, full size, creative laptops, gaming laptops, but like i9s are 8 core, 16 thread, Core i7s are 6 core, 12 threads, Core i5s are 4 core, 8 threads, and the the power consumption on these is all 45 watts. I was really excited about the fact that they now have support for up to 128 gigabytes of DDR4 memory, which is huge. Gamers don't need 128 megabytes of memory. Even most video editors don't need 128 gigabytes of memory. But for the applications that can actually take advantage of that, being able to put that in a mobile platform, I think is a kind of a huge development. I also nerd out about that. And then kind of, if you look at this page, right, the video's rolling here. It's, we have super cool graphics. It's not like it's looking like a small part, but there was some of the stuff that was announced in this was kind of funny. Where is it? There's one line in there that just had me laughing in the announcements. Where did it go? Muscle books. So that 9980 HK being, quote, fully unlocked for muscle books. And then the 9980H, which is locked for TNL and creator laptops. And I'm assuming TNL is transform and lighting, which would be a really bizarre way of saying gaming laptops. Or perhaps they're thinking of a new category of field rendering for people who make movies and stuff. And then kind of in the shadow of this, they announced that they had another 25 another 25 desktop processors, at the high end of $488, 3.6 gigahertz, 8-core, 16-thread Core i9. And they have versions with and without integrated graphics now, a ton of Core i7, Core i5, Core i3 parts, and then literally all the way down to 2-core, 2-thread Celeron starting at $42 and 3 or 4 2-core, 4-thread Pentium Gold CPUs. And those are priced between $64 and $86. You guys pointed out that support for Optane memory is like universal on all the new processors now.
Yes.
The Optane memory push, right? And then the Optane memory H10, 16 and 32 gigabyte options with up to 1 terabyte of QLC NAND 3D storage or QLC 3D NAND storage. So all of a sudden it seems like Intel's like, God damn it, we're putting Optane in everything. We're going to get our money out of the development of this technology.
Hey, I happen to have the 512 gigabyte variant of it right here. This is the new Focus. This is the H10. It has Optane 32 gigabytes and another 500 gigabytes of QLC NAND on board.
Is it going? I mean, how are you going to test that? How are you going to? Is there any easy or meaningful way of testing the performance on that compared to a standard SSD?
Easy, absolutely not. And this is where I greatly miss former co-host of this program and storage editor at PC4, Alan Malventano, who had his own testing methodology developed for Optane before he departed. But in just trying to assess its performance from a real world standpoint, which I've been doing for the last few days, kind of in between other reviews, it's not cut and dry. It's very specific kind of use cases and scenarios where you'll see a big difference. The biggest difference being you have 2 drives here. What's interesting about this product is it's 2 separate drives occupying one M.2 package where it's a PCIe Gen 3 by 4, but there are 2 by 2 devices on it. And they're not linked in hardware. They actually show up if your device understands what this is. They show up as 2 separate devices in the disk manager. And when you use Intel's Optane software or the Intel SSD toolbox to create the Optane cache, it merges them, but it's all virtual. It's just in software, and it's only supported under Windows with the software. So it's difficult to assess it just head to head with other drives, just because you have this ultra low latency cache that isn't necessarily all that fast and raw like throughput compared to really fast M.2 drives, but it definitely does offset slower QLC NAND. So the 2 combined make for a lot more of a compelling experience, and especially does well with things running in the background is what I've seen. Like you can have a file copy going and open up another application, and it's as if there was absolutely no background activity because it shifts the new activity over to the Optane half and
Right.
it allows background activity to stay on the NAND. So that's interesting, and it provides some really good kind of multitasking, which is kind of what you'll be doing on a laptop, especially if it's like a work laptop. This is a product that's only on OEM machines. There's no retail availability of this yet. So anyhow,
part of what frustrates me about Optane at this point is, one, SSDs have gotten so cheap. Two, it's kind of bizarre because all of the management between the Optane memory on the M2 stick and the QLC, the NAND, the main SSD on that, is all handled via software. So it's not doing it internally, which would seem to me to be faster. And then literally, it seems like what Optane is doing right now is just doubling up on what Windows does with your main system memory, which is to cache the stuff that you use the most often or that it expects you to use next. So, okay, so it's giving you a lot more space for that compared to 8 gigs of system memory or 16 gigabytes of system memory, depending on which Optane device you have. But, you know, it feels like it's turning into a weird sort of checkbox, you know, with Optane memory, 5 gigahertz, more ponies, Optane memory, you know, in the sense of that it's, you know, you're not looking at this and going like, this is amazing. It makes everything better.
It does kind of seem to, you know how, like you mentioned, system memory. If you've opened up an application within a single user session and then you close it or go back to it, because it's likely still resident in memory, it's super fast. Like you open up an application twice during the same Windows session and it always opens up much faster the second time, unless you've just completely used up all of your available RAM. And that's kind of what this does, is it sort of bridges the gap. Like if you're on a fresh boot and it's something that you frequently access, it will kind of act like it's already there and available a little bit more than having to actually go fetch it from storage. But you're not going to see as big of a benefit from this if you're coming from a machine that already had a fast M.2 drive. This is more of like it's gonna blow you away if you're coming from spinning storage, but this is not something that's coupled with
but any SSD
media. Yeah,
any SSD will blow you away coming from spinning storage. I think you put in the rundown. There's a really nice breakdown of everything that was announced on Nantech, and I read this article too. One of the things is great where they start talking about all of the various suffixes now in the Intel lineup. You know, but scroll down. There's where they subdivide their CPUs in two ways. The Core i series number. Scroll up a little bit. Thank you. Core i9, 8 cores with hyperthreading. Core i7, 8 cores, no hyperthreading. Core i5, 6 cores, no hyperthreading. Core i3, 4 cores, no hyperthreading. Pentium Gold, 2 cores, hyperthreading. Celeron, 2 cores, no hyperthreading. And then each processor says Nantech, and I should give a shout out to Ian Cuttress on that one. K is overclockable. KF, the suffix, is overclockable with no integrated graphics. No suffix is a standard CPU, 54 to 65 watt TDP with integrated graphics. F is no integrated graphics, as you would expect from KF. And then T is a low power 35 watt TDP. So there's a ton of information inside of there. But I'm looking at this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 i9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 Core i7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Core i5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Core i3 processors. I got to be honest with you. I really, 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 really want to see what the thermals are going to be like, or what they have to do to keep an 8-core, 16-thread, part that's running at a base frequency of 3.6 gigahertz and supposed to turbo up to 5 gigahertz. I really want to see how they keep those cool in laptops. I mean, I said screaming fans and massive cooling systems. 45
watts is no joke anyway to dissipate. And then I know the 5 gigahertz number is just single core boost. So for just very quick, bursty, single threaded type workloads, you might be hitting that, but I can imagine most of the time, if you're multi-threaded at all, you're going to be significantly closer to that base frequency.
I just want to see them actually hit the base, stay at the base frequency. And I admit I'm sensitive to this because a friend of mine freaked out because he bought a new $3,000 Surface Book and was like, it's slow. And because it was passively cooled, now nobody's going to put a 45-watt part in a passively cooled laptop. But it just, because it was passively cooled, it was considerably, I remember having like an XPS 13 alongside this laptop. The XPS 13 was like 2 years old, had a Core i5, sold for $1,000, and was running certain tests like 25% faster than the Surface Book. If you were, it's just amazing to see how dense these parts have gotten at this point, or at least it feels that way. NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650. This is the current least expensive, entry-level, most affordable next generation GPU from NVIDIA. And I sense you being less than thrilled.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what this is replacing, and I'm saying that because NVIDIA didn't come out and say this is the replacement for anything. This is just another logical step filling up the product stack. And in this case, they've been moving backwards since the launch of the higher end 20 series cards and all the way through the 16 series now with this. And this is hitting a $149 MSRP target for the entry level cards. The particular card that I started with that I've reviewed today is actually a little bit higher powered. It's factory overclocked and has a 6-pin power connector, even though this is hitting that 75-watt target NVIDIA likes to have. We've seen since the GTX 750 Ti, a product come out that can run off of board power alone. You can upgrade almost any desktop, including commodity desktops from Best Buy. So that's kind of what this is targeting. Like, what kind of acceptable gaming experience can we get without the need to upgrade your power supply or even have a higher end power supply at all? So it's a little interesting to me that the first two cards I've seen actually have 6-pin power connectors and are factory overclocked. So we'll have to see, how many of these end up hitting that 75-watt target. I imagine probably about half of them or so, and the other half will be more aggressively clocked like this one. But if you look at the GTX 1050 Ti, which has been around for a long time, I looked that up this morning. I believe it came out in October of 2016. So we're talking 2.5+ years on that card, which launched at $139. So similar pricing, especially if you factor in inflation, they're about the same. And what you're getting with the 1650 is a card that has a pretty big bump across the board as far as specs goes. It's using Turing, the latest architecture, instead of Pascal. So this isn't a rebrand or a respin or anything. It's using a new core. It's a smaller core called TU117, which is a step again smaller than the TU116 that we saw with the 1660 and 1660 Ti. You have a significant drop in the SMs, the actual modules that only provide 896 CUDA cores with this card. And then pretty aggressive base and boost clocks, 1485 base, boost 1665, compared to what we saw with the 1050 Ti, which were considerably lower. They were in like under 13 to under 1400. And on the other hand, this is still only using 4 gigabytes of GDDR5. So it is that previous generation memory. It only matches the total memory of the 1050 Ti, although it is faster. It's overall a gigabit per second faster memory, so you do get more memory bandwidth. But this is, once again, as we saw with the rest of the Turing lineup, this is a little bit bigger. Like across the board, these are bigger chips. This is a 200 millimeter squared die, when that older Pascal chip, even at a higher process at 14 nanometers, was only 132 millimeters squared. So same 75-watt TDP, but Turing just bigger. It seems to be a little bit more power hungry once you start clocking it up, which is why I think this MSI card has an external power connector. But just raw specs aside, that means nothing unless the performance is there. And I fully expected this to easily best that 1050 Ti, if for no other reason than it had a big advantage in CUDA core count and just overall a better spec. But the performance, while definitely better than the 1050 Ti, if you look at the review and all the reviews that are out there, it is kind of in between a 1050 Ti and a 1060. So this is not, supplanting a 1060 at $149 by any means.
Right. I mean, in some of the benchmarks, it seems even worse than that, because on one hand, you're like, oh, it's a 25% increase over the 1050 Ti. And then it's like, oh, yeah, that's from 44 frames to 56 frames.
Yeah.
It's
not the super exciting stuff, but it's definitely.
But then but then a 1060 is running at 73 frames, and it's like, oh, really? Because at least, they could have done a little better,
I can imagine. I don't know any of this, but I can imagine we'll see a 1650 Ti. I don't know why they wouldn't, because there's a pretty big gap if you just look at pricing between this card at $149 and the next card up the stack at $219. There's definitely room for them to come out with like a $179 or $189 MSRP faster variant. I don't know if TU117 leaves anything on the table, if there's more SMs that could be enabled, or if we'll see another variant of the TU116, but there'll probably be something for people who want a little bit more. But it will definitely not be hitting this 75 watt target. This is probably what they had to do to meet that, especially with that larger die. But what's a bigger problem, I think, not just their own product stack and how it'll probably look a little bit different this time next year, especially. What I see is being a challenge for them right now is how aggressive AMD has been with pricing. And they were happy to send out word to media before this launch saying, hey, check out the RX 570. It's selling for $139. I was looking this morning. It's selling for $129 to $139 for entry-level cards on Newegg today. And if that's a temporary price drop, it's very smart. If it's a permanent price drop, that gives NVIDIA some problems with the pricing on this card, because the 570 that I tested prior to this review, it bests this card in every test at 1080p using the same settings. So if it's less expensive and higher performing, I mean, it does have a much higher power draw. That's one thing I need to, the Sapphire Nitro Plus card that I was using, I need to do some power testing on that, add that to the chart. But it has a 6-pin and an 8-pin connector on it. So it's pretty serious power draw to get those performance numbers. But if you have the power supply for it and don't mind the added power draw, which is probably about double what this card is, then you're getting significantly better performance. What's that?
I think most people have a room for a 150 watt GPU at this point.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people's existing GPUs are probably pulling down 150 watts or more. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the prices for the 570s up on Newegg right now, and it's like 140, 140, 150, 130, 160, 130, 140, 130. And okay, the $130 cards are 4 gigabyte parts, not 8 gigabyte parts, but man,
that's what this Nvidia card is. So I mean, apples to apples, this is a 4 gigabyte GTX 1650. So, and there was actually a 4 gigabyte card that I tested too, that Sapphire card that I used. So it's, I mean, if you're at 1080p, that seems to be fine. I wasn't really running into a memory ceiling at these lower settings. It wasn't going ultra. It's just 1080 high or 1080 standard with these games. So you're at like 2.5 to 3 gigabytes of frame buffer with those settings.
Going to be a rough spring for NVIDIA, it seems like. it just feels that way. You want to talk about the world's most ridiculously awesome micro SD card, or go deep on Fractal Design's S2 Vision RGB, which hints maybe a computer case?
Well, we can talk about the card. I know that our own Jeremy was talking about this last night, and the lovely photo that Lexar has of this card nestled within a flower. But yeah, 1 terabyte in a micro SDXC card that have some pretty decent performance as well. That's
once you get the aerial density that high, you would hope they have decent performance. I mean, I have a 400 gigabyte micro SD card from SanDisk in my phone, which was like, just, it's good to have all of the storage in your phone. Even I take a while to fill 400 gigabytes. But this is even more ridiculous. There's like one or two 512 gigabyte parts. And when I say this, I want to point out, like, if it's not from SanDisk or Samsung, I'm probably never going to own it. Lexar, I think, is a solid company, and I won't buy any micro SD cards from anywhere but Amazon fulfilled channels or from the shelves of my local Costco, because these things are spoofed. Don't buy any micro SD card from anybody who's mailing it. A Newegg, of course, I think would be a safe bet. But it's amazing how people are still spoofing or selling fake undersized micro SD cards and SD cards. The pricing, do they have pricing for this? Because I feel like I've read the article twice and still couldn't find pricing information.
There was no pricing last night either.
Okay.
When I was looking at this, so I think they're kind of gauging the market, perhaps. I would like to see this launch this year, but in pricing, if you look at, we were looking last night at like 500 gigabyte cards are the current high end for micro SD. Right. And those are, I think, in the $139-ish range.
Well, I mean, you can pick up a SanDisk Ultra 400 gigabyte card for $65. The Extreme, which is like C10, U3, V38, the sort of slight, and the reality is it's not really that much faster in real world use. It's just burlier, is $105 for 400 gigabytes. Samsung's running $102 for 512 gigabytes. I haven't seen anything bigger than 512 gigabytes for sale. Lexar's 512 gigabyte card is $82.99. Yeah, the prices on these have just dropped, to say the least. Because I think I paid $90 or $120 for a SanDisk Ultra, what's now $65 from SanDisk. I think I paid like 30 or 40% more when I bought that about a year ago. It's also crazy to realize that there's 15,374 reviews of a 400 gigabyte micro SD card at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are pretty much all smartphone users too, I would imagine. That seems to be.
I would imagine. That would make sense. Yeah. No information on when it's going to ship. No information on pricing.
It's always the way. It's like that trade show phenomenon where it's no availability, no pricing. No availability, no pricing.
I do love, though, and props to the SSD review. Les Tokar opens with, great relationships can lead to great things, basically saying, I got a shiny box. I got this awesome thing in a tiny box. So that's a nice shout out as to exactly why the coverage is there. And that's perfectly reasonable. Perfectly unreasonable, perfectly shiny, perfectly unicorn vomity in a delightful way. You did another case review, Fractal Design's Define S2 Vision RGB case.
Yeah. Fractal Design, if you're familiar with the Swedish, or they have Scandinavian design is kind of their marketing, and it's very simplistic. They have not really embraced RGBs to any great extent. And then we have this case, which took the existing Define S2, which is one of those completely wide open internal chamber style modern cases that has no external storage or anything like that. And it adds a whole bunch of tempered glass to it and RGB fans and an RGB light strip. So definitely off the path a little bit for Fractal, and pricing too. Like this is like the fourth or fifth case in a row that I've looked at that's been really pricey, like over $200. So this is $239 from them. What's interesting is if you don't care about RGB, they have a blackout version of this case, which has no lighting and is $189.99. So you can save yourself about $50 and avoid the lighting if you so choose and get the same exact case otherwise. But this is very classy looking, certainly. I mean, it arrives with glass side panels on the front and back, a glass front panel, and a glass top panel. And for those more concerned with ventilation than having that extra glass panel on top, it comes with an alternative panel and an extra bracket. Like you can actually swap brackets, add more fan support, add better cooling. So it's an extensible design, and it's very, very nicely made. The build quality is top notch. It's another one of those Fractal cases I've tested that every bit of it just seems very solid. Like the metal's just a little bit thicker than you might be used to, and the construction's a little bit stiffer, and it just feels like a quality product. But that's been the case with Fractal cases that are like $100 to $150. And this one at $239, you really have to want those 440 millimeter RGB fans that it ships with in this version. But otherwise, no complaints about the case other than to make the component chamber as big as they have with this, and it's massive. There's only there's less than 30 millimeters, I think, was the number of total clearance behind the motherboard tray. And you're kind of fighting with hard drive storage back there as well, because with other Fractal cases like the Define R6, a very popular case that is in their Define series, all of the hard drives kind of protrude into the storage or the component area. And with this case, and with the S2 before this, they're kind of lined up behind the motherboard tray. So a lot of space you'd normally have for cable routing is taken up by your hard drive trays. So it's a trade-off, but it works. I was able to build a clean build without too much trouble, partly because they have the nice like Velcro straps that are included back there and help keep everything tucked away. But it's expensive. It's another $200 plus case, and I'm a little concerned about this trend this year already. It's like, has inflation crept up on me this much that computer cases really cost $200 now? It used to be $100 plus was a lot.
I had a funny conversation with somebody where they were talking about a particular category of electronics that I don't want to name. And for them, they worked kind of on the inside of the industry, and they pointed out that company X was operating on a sort of 4X cost for their price basis, where company Y was working at a 9X cost, or 9X their kind of parts cost to create their price for a particular piece of hardware. And his point was that so much of this is arbitrarily set to what they think the market will bear, or arbitrarily set to, they want to make a lot of money. I mean, part of what's defined Intel is looking for 25% profit margins, and working really, really hard to make lots and lots of money. And that's does it cost as much to make this case? I don't think metal's gone up this much. Metal went up a few years ago, but it hasn't gone up significantly since. It is a complicated case. It is a sophisticated case. It's got to be a pain in the ass to build. I don't know. It's also, all it takes is one kind of, one particularly high profile product to kind of completely reset what people expect or are willing to pay for a set of headphones. I mean, for a particular, piece of equipment. I'm thinking obviously of headphones where Beats, there were lots of $300 headphones before Beats. But Beats proved that you could make a staggering amount of money off of a $300 pair of headphones, which nobody had ever thought of before or expected before. So maybe that's the new trend, People with disposable income buying $200+ enclosures because they are more fancy. I've just stunned you into silence. Or your connection.
It's a grim reality. I was just listening with displeasure at your explanation of what the market bears and pricing, and I understand margins and that sort of thing, but I don't like it. I mean, look at Apple is a great example. We famously has a 400% markup on everything. So the market does bear that. It just depends on. I look at the enthusiast PC community, the DIY community, generally, they get excited about maximizing their dollar. Price performance is king, And it's all about saving money and having a better experience and control over your build versus going out and buying one of those like boutique builds from the major companies that supply them and pre-build the system for you, but you pay a big premium over the actual components pricing. And then I look at components like this, it's like, that's a really nice looking case. How much is it? And I'm thinking like maybe 179. No, 239. And I feel a little out of touch. So maybe I need to analyze the market a little bit. But it's been pretty fast. I mean, I spent 5 years reviewing cases, and we're really starting to see 200 is the new 100 as far as those premium cases go.
It might also be in part because people, I mean, I've got, let's see, that case is 3 years old. There's a case over there that's 7 years old. That case is 4 years old. I mean, if you're going to be holding on to it for a while, maybe it seems more reasonable. Of course, I've got a couple cases in the garage that I found on the curbside for absolutely free, and I upcycled them. Something I don't think we really talked about at all is apparently Intel's had a processor shortage, and part of why we're seeing so many new products with AMD processors inside of it from major PC manufacturers is because Intel was having supply issues.
I
think
Mark Hochman, that came out of a Digitimes report originally back in March, like early to mid-March. Digitimes was saying that by Q2 of this year, their supply shortages were going to cause manufacturers to have to look at AMD and ARM solutions. Mm-hmm. And it was in lower cost products like Chromebooks and that sort of thing. But sorry to interrupt.
No. It pretty much nails it. Mark Hochman wrote it up over at PC World. Hi, Mark. The subhead on this is more chips in the market typically mean cheaper PC prices, so keep an eye out. But CFO Amy Hood from Microsoft, because Microsoft was frustrated because they were having chip supply issues for the Surface laptop lines or the Surface computer lineup. And their line this week was, quote, in Windows, the overall PC market was stronger than we anticipated, driven by improved chip supply that met both unfulfilled Q2 commercial and premium consumer demand, as well as better than expected Q3 commercial demand, which I'm pretty sure is not how Ms. Hood speaks, but it's fun to read that way. Partially having tested some Surface products, maybe demand was down because people were buying $3,000 laptops and being pissed off because they ran slow. But, the article does point out that Intel acknowledged that they had manufacturing problems back in January. And that Microsoft at least is, quote, feels fine for Q4. So
it's just it's not been a great 12 months for Intel, that's for sure. They've had, it can't be easy to be the designer and the fab, and they're having to overcome issues with fabrication, even though they have the designs I'm sure that they would like to have in large scale production at 10 nanometer and below. It's just not happening for them. And of course, AMD enjoys the ability of just kind of shopping their design to a fab that can support it. So they're at 7 nanometers because TSMC is at 7 nanometers.
Well, but also that was a point of pride for Intel for so many years. It's like, we're going to stay ahead of the market because we're staying ahead on process and we can stomp all these third-party manufacturers into the ground. But that has not worked so well for them in the last couple of years, obviously. iFixit did a teardown of a Samsung Galaxy Fold, which, if you like teardowns, is as fraught and exciting as any teardown I've seen. I do love, if you scroll down to step 3, unlike the dull slabs of glass we're used to, this smartphone tablet hybrid has lots of potential entry points and not the good kind. And, they're pointing.
I feel anxiety with just the subject matter, and I'm now just looking at the pictures, and it's alarming what they're doing with that guitar pick.
Yeah. This 7mm gap doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it leaves the display exposed, writes iFixit. So should something accidentally enter its curtains for the screen? Oops. When closed, the screen is protected, but the spine is flanked by massive gaps that our opening picks hop right into. These gaps are less likely to cause immediate screen damage, but will definitely attract dirt. And they note, in a special note, it's been a while since we've seen a phone with this many gaps, with the industry trending away from moving parts and towards sealed slabs. It'll be interesting to see how future folding designs overcome these weaknesses. And if you keep scrolling down, they heated it up. They started popping the covers loose. And the battery comes out, the main logic board, the left side board, and where did it go? Somewhere in there you will actually see them working on the hinge. But it's crazy, like around step 15, you see where the displays, like there's two displays. They're glued to a thin metal plate. The plate is essentially glued to the phone's frame. That's how they get that wide radius fold on the center there. And there it is. If you go one more down, you see the actual hinge. 4 spring-loaded clasps, 2 hinges, 1 center hinge that has a gear system. Quote, this distributes the opening force equally, ensuring the 2 halves of the phone open synchronously. And then there's 2 flex cables in between that run there for the phone halves to communicate. This is about as messy and complicated a design I've seen in a mobile product in approximately forever.
It's like a large-scale version of the AirPods, which no sane person would ever want to try to get through all that glue in those tiny quarters and try to work on themselves. And this just looks terrifying. And imagine, what if you do everything right with this phone? You use the official case, which I think is coming for it, if it's ever released. And you do everything, like you carefully handle it with clean hands and have it nowhere near water. And then your 3-year-old picks it up and you don't know what happened. And now the screen is like dangling by a thread of glue.
Yeah. I mean, this just, you think about a Game Boy, which is, obviously 3,000 years old at this point, but, Nintendo set this kind of standard for portable electronics that were enormously difficult to kill. And this is as complicated as any laptop I've ever seen. Maybe not as sophisticated as sort of the Watch Link designs that Lenovo did on some of their Yogas, but this is a lot. There's a lot going on here for a phone. iFixit told Samsung that they folded these phones more than 200,000 times with this hinge system. We don't doubt it, but maybe humans aren't quite as gentle as Samsung's robots are. And they note there's no ingress protection, there's large gaps, dirt can get in, and that's going to be problematic if it gets into the hinge or in the display.
How does it get a 2 out of 10 for repairability?
A single Phillips driver takes care of all the screws, so there's no proprietary screws. Many components are modular and can be replaced independently, which is a big deal because we've seen some mobile devices where everything's kind of you either replace everything or you replace nothing. I stare over at a particular iPhone in the corner of my desk right now with frustration. And so, it's certainly not I think it's pretty reasonable. They point out that battery replacements are possible but unnecessarily difficult. The main display is exposed. The hinge looks kind of sketch. Glued down glass on both front and back means greater risk of breakage and makes repairs difficult to stop. This is just, this is a phone that was designed to be sent back. This is a phone that was designed to have you buy a new one if anything goes wrong.
But I mean, at $1980, it's that disposable price range everybody's comfortable with, right? $1,000. I dropped it. All right, just buy a new one. It's fine.
Just buy a new one.
I want to know what insurance is for this, or if anybody even wants to insure it if it hits carriers, stores.
Somebody will want to insure it.
Yeah, for $500 a month.
Yeah, don't. It's like getting flood insurance at the Jersey Shore. You guys have a great kind of collection link on PCPro.com talking about all the issues with 5G and the rollout, which has been brutal. I think we talked about that a bit last week. There's a great article up on CNET from Eli Blumenthal talking about the Galaxy S10 5G launch. Verizon's unveiled the next 25G cities. And in case you were wondering, that 5G Samsung phone is going to be $1,300. And the first 5G or first phone with 5G actually built in, not to take anything away from Motorola, but their 5G was an adapter that snapped onto the back of one of their high-end phones. But they're basically taking pre-orders, $1,300 for a 256 gig S10 5G, 512 gigabytes or $1,400. So why wouldn't you? Coming in a Crown Silver or Verizon exclusive Majestic Black, right? Mr. Blumenthal. So May 16th is when it's available. The new cities on the list include Atlanta, Boston, Charlotte, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dallas, Des Moines, Denver, Detroit, Houston, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Missouri, Little Rock, Memphis, Phoenix, Providence, San Diego, Salt Lake City, and Washington, D.C. Notice they don't list San Francisco there. Perhaps it's already here and I just didn't realize it, but I feel that our Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Orlando, Florida, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, and San Jose. Okay, so those join the original 12 cities. I'm fascinated that they rolled it out in San Francisco. Now I'm kind of tempted to try to find a way to test it. That's going to be painful in San Francisco because San Francisco has a big rock hill in the middle of it. Requires 74,000 antennas to communicate even before you get into the super high frequency stuff that is sort of the core of 5G. Do you care at this point? Are you even remotely interested?
Well, no, because not only is it not anywhere near me and there are no phones yet other than that S10 5G, it's just, I think about the problems that I have within my own home with wireless reception as routers over time move to higher frequencies, and higher frequencies don't travel as far. And if you've ever lived in a house with lath and plaster walls, you'll know that what happens in one room is not indicative at all of what might happen around the corner from that room. And laptops losing connectivity with no warning is an everyday occurrence, multiple times a day. Getting the baby monitor in my son's room to ever even connect to our home network, was a nightmare. And like moving routers around to try to find what actually works.
Moving to mesh routers was like the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Because I played around with a lot of stuff, and then in theory, right? Because I'm kind of horrified because your house is actually smaller than mine, and mine's like 1,150 square feet, which is a typical craftsman cottage, but compared to a lot of the 5,000 square foot stuff that's being built all over the place, is tiny. But again, horsehair plaster and lath, multiple layers of wall. It was amazing for me that a router that should absolutely do 3,000 square feet could barely do 2/3 of my house. So I will say, if you can get a Netgear Orbi, it's a life changer. The Eero stuff's pretty good too.
I think about those issues, and then the kind of technology that's been used or will be used for 5G rollouts, which, it's various different forms of technology that are all supposed to work together. And some of these amazing speeds only come about when you have ideal conditions and or carrier aggregation. You have multiple links for down and upload, giving you those crazy speed numbers. But if you don't have good reception, that is all for naught. And if you're in an area where you have any kind of interference from large buildings and that sort of thing, or like you were talking about, like rocky expanses or protrusions, right, you're not going to have that ideal experience, and you're going to end up with something that's a lot closer to 4G. So it's just, I think about microcells and like the actual range of some of these things. And the concept I came up with last night when I was thinking this over was 5G drones. Just have little drones with satellite dishes on them float around in your vicinity, and that's what provides you with your 5G connectivity. That Chicago is one of the cities on the rollout. And I'm thinking, you can't even get a reliable GPS signal walking around downtown Chicago because the buildings are so tall. It'll tell me I'm on one street, and then the next moment it'll tell me I'm a street over, or I've already crossed the street and I'm standing still. It worries me a bit that you're going to get a great experience among that kind of density in larger towns. But I'm cynical.
It's reasonable. It's a reasonable reaction. Everybody I've talked to who's kind of inside the industry on this one is kind of their facial expressions look like small children taking terrible medicine, or they're actively saying things that cannot be quoted under any circumstances involving 4-letter words, or again strained facial expressions because they're trying so terribly to hold the line on what is clearly going to be one of those complicated rollouts. It's an interesting theory. We could probably talk about it a bunch on a show after these actually start shipping, or more than the small corner of the population that can afford a $1,300 phone starts rolling into this, or when more of the U.S. population is reached. But it is, the goal is to give access to everything everywhere that wants to have an IP address, and I find it slightly horrifying that hey, we can take every device in your house and give it its own connection to our network. So there's more ways for you to pay more money to your mobile carrier. And if you're not watching the video, you can't see me nodding my head in a particularly sarcastic fashion, because apparently Sebastian and I are building up on the 5G snark back and forth. I'm mostly excited about what it should do, at the base stations, for how it's handling phone connections and users, and that it should make crowded situations particularly less traumatic or particularly less frustrating because of the way it's parsing out access to the tower. That I think is going to have more of an impact on most people than the actual bandwidth increases that it promises. I'm really kind of curious to get a hold of a phone and start playing around in San Francisco and seeing if I actually get any 5G anywhere. But that's something to go into on another day. PCPro.com is unusually snark-free, given that Sebastian Peak runs the editorial side of things there. And when he's not benchmarking, GPUs or taking care of his child or beating on cases with a hammer, he is actually creating more wonderful content over there. If you haven't been to PCPro.com, you should go there. It is PC Perspective. It is a wonderful source of hardware reviews. My name is Patrick Norton. You can find me over at tekthing.com, techthing.com, which is the weekly show where we talk about technology. In fact, we're obviously talking about Core i9s on the show this week, mobile hotspots, and I got kind of crazy. I had a viewer who wants to get the new audio, that $250 new audio card, and wanted a recommendation for his speakers, and I had to sort of break the news that he's going to need an amplifier too. And I probably wouldn't start out with a $250 sound card that is lovely, but probably not where you should be spending your money if you're just upgrading from a aged pair of computer laptop speakers. So I do all that in about 5 minutes. So, which I think I took longer than talking about it on this show. You're listening to This Week in Computer Hardware. We call it Twitch. You can find it over at twit.tv/TWICH. That's the place to find all of our older episodes, all the information on how to subscribe to the show, the video, the audio, and we hope you enjoy the show. Tell your friends about it and join us each and every week. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Sebastian Peak.
Catch you next week on Twitch.